Good Sunday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 28th. Today, we're reading together in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Hope that you've had a great weekend up until this point. It's a holiday weekend. Lots going on this weekend and into tomorrow as well. Happy Memorial Day to everyone. Let me go ahead and get our text up on the screen for us, and we'll read together here in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Want to give you a word to keep in mind, or maybe, I guess it's a word. I think it's a compound word. I don't think it's two words, but a compound word to keep in mind as we're looking through this text, and is the word safeguards. That really what we have here within this text are a number of safeguards for different situations in which an Israelite might find himself or herself. And these are things that they just need to be aware of, and things they need to be cognizant of, so that they do not cross a line in which they might defile Yahweh or defile his space. So that's what we're thinking about here in Deuteronomy chapter 23, and also defile Yahweh's people, those whom he loves, those who are created in his image, especially those who might be in vulnerable positions. That's what we're thinking about here today in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Let's begin reading in verse number 1. Deuteronomy 23, verse number 1. No man whose testicles have been crushed or whose penis has been cut off may enter Yahweh's assembly. No one of illegitimate birth may enter Yahweh's assembly. None of his descendants, even to the 10th generation, may enter Yahweh's assembly. No Ammonites or Moabites may enter Yahweh's assembly. None of their descendants, even to the 10th generation, may ever enter Yahweh's assembly. This is because they did not meet you with food and water on the journey after you came out of Egypt, and because Balaam, son of Beor, from Pethor in Aram Naharaim, was hired to curse you. Yet Yahweh your God would not listen to Balaam, but he turned the curse into a blessing for you, because Yahweh your God loves you. Never pursue their welfare or prosperity as long as you live. Do not despise an Edomite, because he is your brother. Do not despise an Egyptian, because you were a resident alien in his land. The children born to them in the 3rd generation may enter Yahweh's assembly. When you are encamped against your enemies, be careful to avoid anything offensive. If there is a man among you who is unclean because of a bodily emission during the night, he must go outside the camp. He may not come anywhere inside the camp. When evening approaches, he is to wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come inside the camp. You are to have a place outside the camp and go there to relieve yourself. You are to have a digging tool in your equipment. When you relieve yourself, dig a hole with it and cover up your excrement. For Yahweh your God walks throughout your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you, so your encampments must be holy. He must not see anything indecent among you, or he will turn away from you. Deuteronomy 23, verse 15, do not return a slave to his master when he has escaped from his master. Let him live among you wherever he wants within your city gates. Do not mistreat him. No Israelite woman is to be a cult prostitute, and no Israelite man is to be a cult prostitute. Do not bring a female prostitute's wages or a male prostitute's earnings into the house of Yahweh your God to fulfill any vow, because both are detestable to Yahweh your God. Do not charge your brother interest on silver, food, or anything that can earn interest. You may charge a foreigner interest, but you must not charge your brother Israelite interest, so that Yahweh your God may bless you in everything you do in the land you are entering to possess. If you make a vow to Yahweh your God, do not be slow to keep it, because he will require it of you, and it will be counted against you as sin. But if you refrain from making a vow, it will not be counted against you as sin. Be careful to do whatever comes from your lips, because you have freely vowed what you have promised to Yahweh your God. When you enter your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat as many grapes as you want until you are full, but do not put any in your container. When you enter your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck heads of grain with your hand, but do not put a sickle to your neighbor's grain. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 23. Again, the word for this particular chapter is the word safeguards. There are safeguards here concerning the assembly of Yahweh's people to worship. Whenever it talks about the Yahweh's assembly, that's what I believe is being discussed here, is a worship assembly. Not that they could not be a part of Israel, and not that they could not be in covenant with Yahweh, but specifically the worship assembly that would take place either at the tabernacle or in the temple setting. These were things that anyone who was less than clean or unwhole, I guess unholy, but also unwhole in regards to these men with particular body parts being maimed, they could not enter into this assembly. Again, it's the idea of cleanness and being lacking versus whole in the sight of God. So whether it be, again, men who are lacking, or men who are maimed in some way, someone that's of illegitimate birth. Now, there's some options here. Are we talking about born out of wedlock? Are we talking about an incestuous offspring, or are we talking about an Israelite who had a child with a Gentile? I'm not exactly sure. Maybe incest is what's really being talked about here, considering that the group of individuals that are mentioned directly following this, the Ammonites and Moabites, those were products of the incestuous relationship between Lot and his daughter. So maybe that's what's being discussed here. But these type of individuals who are unclean, they cannot enter into Yahweh's assembly. Now, somebody might say, what about Ruth? Wasn't Ruth a Moabitess? She was. Many think, though, that what's being specifically referenced here, though, are Gentile men, that they could not enter into Yahweh's assembly to worship, but women who were married into the people of Israel, that they would be eligible to come into the assembly. But that is an argument based upon Hebrew grammar that is found here, these being masculine terms that are used. There are also those who are discussed. Let's see, part of the Ammonite Moabite goes back to the issues that they had about whenever coming out of Israel, that there was mistreatment there. But there are some individuals, though, such as the Edomites, that they were supposed to respect, and that could eventually come into Yahweh's assembly, or at least that they were not to despise them. And then after the third generation, they could come into Yahweh's assembly. Same thing for the Egyptians, which is very interesting to me. But I guess it gets back to the fact that they were in Egypt for so long, and for a period of time there, maybe a good period of time, they were treated well. So maybe that is a reference to how well they were treated. Therefore, these individuals, once they get into the third generation, could start coming into Yahweh's assembly. Again, this is not about they're not able to be a part of Israel. They're not able to be in covenant with God. No, this is specifically, I believe, in reference to the worship assembly that would take place, the corporate worship that would take place at the tabernacle and or the temple. We're safeguarding, beginning verse 9, the camp of the Israelites as they go out to war, safeguarding against bodily emissions. They were just to, again, pursue cleanliness, not just in a sanitary way, but again, in a theological way before Yahweh. And the reason that they needed to do this, the reason that these cleanliness laws, whether it be the need for washing after a bodily emission or the need to go outside the camp to relieve themselves, is because verse 14, this is really the key. For Yahweh your God walks throughout your camp to protect you and deliver your enemies to you. So your encampments must be holy. Why? Because Yahweh is holy. That's why, if he's going to be among you, if he's going to be in fellowship with you, then you need to have everything in tip-top condition. Again, that gets back to what we talked about with the assembly. Yahweh is there among them at the tabernacle and the temple in their worship. Therefore, everything in those instances needs to be holy and sanctified as well. Slaves are considered in verses 15 and 16. They're the powerless. You need to safeguard the powerless, safeguard the person who is at a strong disadvantage, having been a slave that has escaped from his master. Same thing could be said in verses 19 and 20. Those who are needy or who are poor, safeguard them by not charging them interest. Same thing. We're talking about other people. That's mentioned as well in verses 24 and 25 in regards to your neighbor's crops. If you're walking through the field, you can have some of their grapes, but only to be satisfied, only to gain what you need. You don't start just ripping off grapes and putting them in a Walmart bag and walk off with them. No, you don't do that. That doesn't belong to you. There is a bit of kindness that they show that is expected for travelers, but you don't take advantage of them by overtaking what they have. Same thing with grain. There's generosity here, generosity from the vineyard owner to you, but also a safeguard that you need to recognize that Yahweh's put in place for them, that you don't take advantage of them. Now, in verses 17 and 18, we have safeguards concerning, again, Yahweh's house. Cult prostitution is the subject matter here, and this would have been prostitutes associated with paganism, that this was part of paganistic worship. It was sexual activity was involved in this paganistic worship. You don't allow them to bring the money that they've earned from their sin, from their sexually illicit activities. You don't allow that to be brought into Yahweh's house. You don't bring that in here to fulfill a vow to Yahweh that is detestable to him, whether you're male or female. You don't do that. Speaking of Yahweh and respecting his house, whenever you make a vow, again, there was so much more to the vow process than just saying something. There was an offering and a sacrifice that was associated with that as well. If you do that, you need to be cognizant of safeguarding your integrity, that you don't just make flippant vows, but make sure that if you make something, you are safeguarding your integrity by making sure that you fulfill that. So in so many different aspects of life for the Israelite, God had established for them his safeguards, not what the Pharisees did later on, where they, if we might imagine these as fences that a fence that Yahweh has established to guard his holiness and guard the holiness of his people. But we know later on that the Pharisees established a second row of fences, even before that became their traditions. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about what God has established as his safeguards, as his fences to protect his holiness and the holiness of the people. That's what's at play here in Deuteronomy chapter 23. Again, as you get ready to go into this land, you need to be aware of these things. You need to keep these things in your mind so that as you're living in the land, you can remain the type of people that Yahweh would have you to be. So that's really the word of the day here for Deuteronomy 23 is the word safeguard. Safeguard Yahweh's assemblies. Safeguard his sacred space. Safeguard the encampments where he walked among them to give them the victory. Safeguard your fellow man. Safeguard what belongs to your fellow man. Be thinking about these things in which you can honor and respect and protect not only Yahweh, but things that belong to other people and other people themselves. If you have any questions about this text, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below, whether you're here on Facebook or YouTube, and I'd love to have a discussion with you about what is found here within the text. I'm excited to gather with everyone here in just a little bit for our Bible studies at 10 o'clock and then our worship assembly at 11. We're going to be talking about really something that stems from our reading here in Deuteronomy. We've read a lot about God's people going into Israel, and there's been commands where you're to go carry out this holy war, to go carry out this conquest, and there's going to be a lot of people that are going to die, a lot of enemies of God that are going to be killed because Yahweh says they need to die. A lot of people have issue with that a good God would command mass killing, if we can term it that way. I'm not going to say genocide, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is the case later on today. But how do we reconcile that? Those who might be skeptics of faith, who might have issue with some of the things that are found within Scripture, this is oftentimes one of the things they take great issue with, that God would command killing it, or that God would be the one to prompt killing or to bring the killing of people down himself. What do we do with that? We're going to think about how we can know how to answer that type of question today by talking about how a good God can command mass killing. Hope you will be able to be at our assembly today at 11 o'clock. Thank you so much for tuning into this reading today. We'll be back at it again tomorrow, reading together from Deuteronomy chapter 24. Hope to see you then. Take care. God bless.